Dr. Maya Rodriguez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she finished stitching up the wounded alien child. The little creature had bright blue skin and 4 arms, but its cries of pain sounded just like any human child she had ever treated. Pain was the same everywhere in the galaxy, and so was the relief when that pain went away. The medical bay of the transport ship New Horizon was crowded with refugees from the Kepler 442 system. A civil war had been raging there for months, and thousands of innocent people had been caught in the middle. Most of them were hurt, scared, and far from home. Maya and her team of 12 human doctors and nurses worked around the clock to help. Maya had been a doctor for 15 years, but she had only been working in space for 3. When Earth joined the Galactic Medical Coalition, they needed volunteers to staff medical stations and ships throughout known space. Maya had signed up immediately. She believed that healing was something all intelligent beings could understand. No matter what planet they came from, Commander Jake Sullivan stood in the corridor outside the medical bay, watching Maya work. He was in charge of all human medical operations in this sector of space. It was a big job, but Jake loved it. In the 2 years he had been stationed at Proxima Station, his team had saved over 50,000 lives from 23 different alien species. Jake remembered when he first arrived at Proxima Station. The aliens there had never seen human medical technology before. They were amazed at how quickly humans could heal injuries that other species considered fatal. Human medicine was 50 years ahead of most galactic civilizations, and 100 years ahead of some. The reason was simple. Humans had spent centuries fighting wars against each other. Every war had pushed medical science forward as doctors learned to save soldiers who would have died in earlier conflicts. By the time humans reached the stars, they had become the best healers in the galaxy. Dr. Lisa Bennett was in surgery when the first emergency message came through. She was operating on a young Zephyrian who had been shot in the chest during the evacuation from Kepler 442. The bullet had missed the heart by less than an inch. On most worlds, the patient would have died before reaching a doctor. But Lisa had performed this type of surgery hundreds of times. During her residency at Chicago General Hospital, the message light on her communication device blinked red, indicating maximum priority. Lisa ignored it. Nothing was more important than the life on her operating table. She could deal with messages after she finished saving this young alien's life. The Zephyrian's vital signs stabilized as Lisa closed the final incision. The patient would live, would go home to his family, would have a chance to grow up and have children of his own. This was why Lisa had become a doctor. This moment, when death was turned away and life was preserved, made all the years of study and training worthwhile. Only after her patient was safely in recovery did Lisa check her messages. What she read made her blood run cold. The hegemony of Krath had declared war on all human medical facilities. They had labeled every human doctor, nurse, and medical technician as legitimate military targets. The Krath were a warrior species that had been expanding their empire through conquest for the past 5 years. They were brutal fighters who showed no mercy to their enemies. Their philosophy was simple: the strong survive, the weak die. And anyone who helps the weak is also weak. The Krath had been losing battles against several species who had access to human medical support. Krath soldiers would wound enemy fighters, expecting them to die from their injuries. Instead, human doctors would patch them up and send them back into battle. This had turned many conflicts against the Krath Empire. Their solution was typically direct. If they could not defeat their enemies in battle, they would make sure their enemies had no one to heal their wounded. Every human medical facility in space had suddenly become a target for Krath warships. The attack on Medical Station Epsilon came without warning. Dr. Rodriguez and her team were in the middle of emergency surgery on 3 critically injured civilians. When Krath warships dropped out of hyperspace right on top of them, the medical transport New Horizon was clearly marked with the universal symbol for medical vessels. Under galactic law, attacking a medical ship was considered a war crime. The Krath did not care about galactic law. Plasma cannons lit up the darkness of space as Krath warships opened fire on the defenseless medical transport. The ship's shields were designed to protect against space debris and radiation, not military-grade weapons. They lasted less than 30 seconds. Maya felt the ship shake around her as the first plasma bolt struck home. Emergency lights bathed the medical bay in red as the main power systems failed. She could hear the hull groaning under the stress of the attack, could smell the acrid smoke of burning electronics. Her patient, a middle-aged Andromedan refugee, looked up at her with fear in his large, dark eyes. Maya squeezed his hand gently. "It's going to be okay," she lied, not knowing if either of them would live to see the next hour. The attack lasted only minutes, but those minutes felt like hours to the people trapped inside the dying ship. The New Horizon was a drifting wreck. Of the 47 people on board, only 5 survived. Dr. Maya Rodriguez was not among them. News of the massacre spread through human space within hours. The Krath had not stopped with one ship. They had systematically attacked every human medical facility they could find. Hospitals, medical stations, research laboratories, and relief ships had all been targeted. Thousands of human medical personnel had been killed, along with tens of thousands of patients who had been under their care. The attacks continued for 72 hours. By the time they ended, the Krath had destroyed or damaged every human medical facility in 3 sectors of space. They had killed doctors who had dedicated their lives to healing, nurses who had volunteered to help strangers from distant worlds, and researchers who had been working to cure diseases that affected dozens of species. The galactic community was horrified. Medical neutrality had been respected for over 1,000 years. Even the most brutal civilizations had understood that healers were not legitimate targets of war. The Krath had crossed a line that had never been crossed before. Emergency sessions were called in the Galactic Council. Representatives from hundreds of worlds demanded action against the Krath Empire. Trade sanctions were proposed, diplomatic protests were drafted, and strongly worded condemnations were written. None of it mattered. The Krath had made their position clear through their actions. They would kill anyone who helped their enemies, regardless of galactic law or moral considerations. They had declared war on the very concept of mercy on Earth. President Victoria Hayes stood in the Situation Room beneath the White House, surrounded by her top military advisors. She had spent her entire political career advocating for peaceful solutions to international conflicts. She had built her reputation on diplomacy, negotiation, and humanitarian aid. But as she looked at the reports coming in from across human space, as she read the names of the doctors and nurses who had been murdered for the crime of healing others, she felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. The galaxy was about to learn something about humanity that had been hidden for 30 years. Earth's healers were not defenseless. They were protected by forces that the rest of the galaxy had never seen, had never imagined, and had never needed to fear. Until now. President Victoria Hayes stood before the United Earth Council in the emergency session chamber. The room was silent except for the soft hum of air recyclers and the distant sound of traffic from the streets of Geneva far below. Every representative looked tired. They had been in session for 18 hours straight, trying to understand what had happened to their people in space. Victoria had been president for 6 years. She had won election on a platform of peace and medical diplomacy. Her administration had sent more doctors to alien worlds than any previous government. She had personally approved the funding for every medical station that had been attacked by the Krath. Now those stations were gone. The doctors she had sent to help strangers were dead. The nurses who had volunteered for dangerous assignments had been murdered. The medical researchers who had been working to cure alien diseases had been killed while trying to save lives. Victoria looked at the faces around the table. These were good people who believed in helping others. They had built their careers on the idea that humans could make the galaxy a better place through compassion and healing. The Krath had just proven that compassion could be seen as weakness. "They want to see what happens when they threaten Earth's healers," Victoria said quietly. Her voice was steady, but everyone in the room could hear the anger beneath her calm. "Words, very well. Let them meet Earth's other children." Admiral Ryan Clark had been waiting in the corridor outside the council chamber for 3 hours. Commanded a part of Earth's military that most people did not know existed. While everyone talked about the Terran Medical Corps and the Planetary Defense Force, very few knew about the Special Operations Division. Ryan had been building this division for 20 years. He had recruited the best soldiers from every branch of Earth's military. He had overseen the development of weapons that broke the known laws of physics. It trained units that could appear anywhere in the galaxy within hours of receiving orders. The public thought Earth's military was small and defensive. They were wrong. Earth's military was small and hidden. It was a big difference. When Victoria finally called him into the chamber, Ryan was ready. He had been preparing for this moment since the first reports of Krath aggression had reached Earth 5 years ago. He had watched the alien empire expand through conquest and brutality, and he had known that eventually they would threaten something that Earth could not allow to be threatened. "Admiral Clark," Victoria said as he entered the room, "please tell the Council about your special units." Orion activated the holographic display in the center of the room. Images appeared showing soldiers in black armor, ships that seemed to bend light around them, and weapons that could crack the surface of planets. The council members leaned forward, their eyes wide with surprise. "For the past 20 years, we have been preparing for threats that conventional forces could not handle," Ryan explained. "We have units that can strike anywhere in the galaxy. We have ships that cannot be detected by any known sensors. We have weapons that can destroy entire fleets." Representative Chen from the Pacific Coalition raised her hand. "Why were we not told about these forces?" "Because you never needed to know," Ryan replied simply. "Our healers were protected by treaties and galactic law. But the Krath have shown that they do not respect treaties or law. Now our healers need a different kind of protection." Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb received his activation orders at 3 a.m, Pacific Standard Time. He had been expecting them since the news of the Krath attacks had reached Earth. Webb commanded the 13th Orbital Drop Regiment unit. That officially did not exist. The men and women under Webb's command were not normal soldiers. They had been selected from thousands of applicants for their unique combination of skills, intelligence, and absolute dedication to their mission. They had trained in secret facilities on the dark side of the moon and in hidden bases in the asteroid belt. Webb's regiment was known by a different name among the few who were aware of their existence. They called them Heaven's Wrath because they fell from the sky like avenging angels to destroy anything that threatened Earth's interests. The orders were simple and direct. Every Krath facility that had been involved in the attacks on human medical personnel was to be destroyed. Every Krath commander who had authorized those attacks was to be captured or killed. The entire Krath Empire was to be taught a lesson that would echo through the galaxy for generations. Captain Nicole Carter sat in the command chair of the stealth destroyer, Silent Fury, as it drifted in the empty space between stars. Her ship was one of 12 vessels in Earth's Shadow Fleet. These ships did not appear on any official records. They had been built in secret shipyards beyond Pluto. Using technology that had been classified above top secret, the Silent Fury was invisible to every form of detection known to galactic science. It could travel faster than light without using hyperspace drives. It carried weapons that could destroy entire planets if necessary. Most importantly, it could strike targets from distances that made retaliation impossible. Nicole had been captain of the Silent Fury for 3 years, but she had never fired her weapons in anger. The ship and its sisters had been built as a deterrent, a weapon so terrible that simply knowing it existed would prevent wars from starting. Now the deterrent had failed. The Krath had attacked Earth's healers despite every warning and threat. They had forced Earth to reveal weapons that were meant to stay hidden. They had made the mistake of thinking that mercy was the same thing as weakness. The planning took 72 hours. Every human medical facility that had been attacked was mapped with precise coordinates. Every Krath military installation was identified and analyzed for weaknesses. Every possible escape route was calculated and blocked. Dr. Alan Foster sat in the debriefing room at Luna Base, telling his story for the 5th time. He was the only survivor from Medical Station Epsilon, and his information was crucial to the mission planning. The Krath had kept him alive to interrogate him about human medical techniques. Never realizing that all Earth medical personnel received basic military training, Alan had memorized every detail of the Krath detention facility. Where he had been held. He could describe the guard rotations, the security systems, the layout of the corridors, and the location of the command center. He had spent 3 days in hell, but he had not wasted a single moment. The guards changed shift every 8 hours. Alan told the intelligence officers for the third time. The security sensors are motion-based, but they have blind spots near the ventilation systems. The commander's office is on the 7th level, and he keeps the access codes for the entire facility in a safe behind his desk.
Colonel Webb reviewed.
The intelligence reports as his regiment prepared for deployment. His soldiers checked their weapons, calibrated their armor systems, and ran final diagnostics on their equipment. They had trained for this type of mission hundreds of times. But this would be their first real combat operation. The weapons they carried were not found in any military manual. The armor they wore was made from materials that did not officially exist. The training they had received was based on combat techniques that had been developed in secret laboratories by scientists who had signed lifetime non-disclosure agreements. Webb's soldiers were ready for war, but this would not be a war. In any conventional sense, wars involved armies fighting armies, fleets battling fleets, and nations struggling against nations. What was about to happen would be something different entirely. The message went out on all frequencies, broadcast in every known language throughout the galaxy. It was simple, direct, and absolutely terrifying in its calm certainty. You attacked our healers. You murdered those who sought only to help others. You have made a grave error in judgment. We're coming for you. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. There will be no survivors. You wanted to see what happens when you threaten Earth's children. Now you will learn. The galaxy held its breath and waited for the storm to begin. The first strike came at exactly midnight, Galactic Standard Time. The Krath military base on Zarian 7 was monitoring their sensors when something impossible happened. The base simply stopped existing. One moment, 10,000 Krath soldiers were going about their duties in what they believed was the most secure facility in their empire. The next moment, there was nothing but empty space where the base had been. No explosion, no debris, no warning. Just a brief flash of light that could be seen from 3 star systems away. Captain Nicole Carter watched the sensor readings from her position 3 light-years away. The weapon her ship had fired bent space and time itself, reaching across impossible distances to touch its target. The Krath base had been removed from reality so completely that it would take their scientists years to figure out what had happened. The Silent Fury had fired the opening shot of humanity's response. It was a message written in fire and physics that the Krath would never forget. Their most secure base, protected by shields that could stop any known weapon, had been erased like chalk from a blackboard. General Zektar stood in his command center on the Krath homeworld, staring at reports that made no sense. His communications officer kept repeating the same impossible words. Zarian 7 base is gone, sir. No response to any signals. Long-range sensors show nothing but empty space. Zektar had commanded Krath forces for 30 years. He had conquered 12 worlds and crushed dozens of rebellions. He understood warfare in all its forms. But this was something beyond his experience. Bases did not simply vanish. There had to be wreckage, survivors, some trace of what had happened. Send a patrol ship to investigate, he ordered. The patrol ship would take 6 hours to reach Zarian 7. Zektar did not know that he would receive dozens more impossible reports before those 6 hours were over. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb and his soldiers fell from the sky like black rain. Across 17 different worlds, the 13th Orbital Drop Regiment had deployed simultaneously to every Krath world that had military facilities. They dropped from ships that could not be seen, landed without making sound, began their work immediately. Sergeant Danny Lopez led his squad through the corridors of the Krath prison where Dr. Alan Foster had been held. The facility was 3 kilometers underground and guarded by elite troops who had never lost a prisoner. Lopez's squad had been inside for 37 minutes and had eliminated 63 guards without suffering a single casualty. The Krath guards never saw them coming. Human stealth technology made the soldiers invisible to every form of detection the aliens possessed. They moved through the facility like ghosts, appearing only long enough to eliminate threats. Before vanishing again into shadows that seemed deeper than they should be, Lopez found Dr. Foster in a cell on the 7th level. The doctor was weak from his ordeal, but alive. When Foster saw the black-armored figure standing in his cell door, he smiled for the first time in 3 days. "I knew you would come," Foster whispered. "I told them you would come for me." "We never leave our people behind," Lopez replied. "Can you walk?" Foster nodded, though his legs were shaky. Lopez's team had planned for this possibility. Within minutes, they were carrying the rescued doctor through corridors filled with unconscious guards toward an extraction point that's been cleared by another squad. The rescue of Dr. Foster was broadcast across the galaxy on every news channel. The footage showed a broken man walking out of the Krath's most secure prison, supported by soldiers in armor that seemed to absorb light itself. The message was clear and terrifying. Humanity would tear apart anything to get their people back. "Commander," Jake Sullivan watched the broadcasts from his rebuilt medical station. He had been evacuated when the Krath attacks began, but now he was back. His medical bay was busy again, treating refugees and accident victims just as it had before. Something had changed. The patients whispered among themselves about the humans. They had always respected human medical skills. But now there was something else in their voices: fear. The same species that produced the galaxy's greatest. Healers had just demonstrated that they could also produce its most effective killers. Ryan Clark stood in the Situation Room on Earth, watching reports flood in from across Krath space. Every military installation that had been involved in the attacks on human medical facilities was being systematically destroyed. His forces were moving with precision that seemed almost supernatural. The attacks followed a pattern that the Krath could not predict or counter. Human forces would appear without warning, eliminate their targets with overwhelming efficiency, and then vanish before reinforcements could arrive. The aliens had no defense against enemies they could not see coming. On Krath Prime, General Zektar received his 50th impossible report of the day. A military academy with 5,000 cadets had been evacuated in 30 minutes by soldiers who appeared from nowhere. A weapons factory that employed 10,000 workers had been shut down by a squad of 12 humans who walked through the security systems as if they did not exist. The humans were not killing civilians, Zektar realized. They were being surgical. In their strikes, targeting only military personnel and facilities. But their precision made them even more frightening. An enemy who killed everyone was brutal. An enemy who could choose exactly who lived and who died was something far worse, Captain. Eddie Price led his team through the halls of the Krath High Command building. The structure was supposed to be impregnable, protected by energy shields, and defended by the Empire's most elite guards. Price's team had simply walked through the shields as if they were made of air. The guards never had a chance to fight back. Human weapons fired beams of energy that passed through Krath armor like it was paper. The aliens collapsed where they stood, unconscious but alive. Price's orders were specific: capture the leadership, eliminate military resistance, avoid unnecessary casualties. Price found General Zektar in his command center, surrounded by officers who were frantically trying to coordinate a defense against an enemy they could not locate or understand. When the humans appeared in their midst, like figures from a nightmare, several officers reached for their weapons. They never completed the motion. "General Zektar," Price said, his voice carrying clearly through the translation device on his armor. "You ordered the attacks on our medical facilities. You authorized the murder of doctors and nurses who were trying to help people. You made the mistake of thinking that because we choose to heal, we have forgotten how to kill." Zektar looked at the human soldier standing before him. The armor was black as space itself, and the weapon in his hands hummed with barely contained energy. Behind him, their humans stood guard over the unconscious forms of Krath officers who had been eliminated so quickly that Zektar had not even seen them fall. "What do you want?" Zektar asked. "We want you to understand something," Price replied. "We are humanity's other children. While our brothers and sisters heal the wounded and cure the sick, we protect them from those who would do them harm. You attacked our healers. Now you face us." The holographic displays around the command center showed the systematic destruction of the Krath Empire. Every military base was being eliminated. Every warship was being destroyed. Every government facility was being occupied by human forces who seemed to appear from thin air. Price continued speaking, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. Your empire attacked defenseless medical personnel. You murdered people whose only crime was trying to help others. You declared war on the concept of mercy itself. This is the consequence of that decision. General Zektar watched his empire die on the screens around him. In less than 24 hours, the military force that had conquered 12 worlds had been completely dismantled by an enemy that seemed to exist outside the normal rules of warfare. How many of you are there? Zektar whispered. Price tilted his head slightly. Enough, he said simply. There are always enough of us to protect our healers. Remember that when you tell this story to whoever survives to hear it, the last Krath resistance collapsed at dawn on the second day. Across 17 worlds, human forces had eliminated every military installation, captured every government official, and rescued every human prisoner. The Krath Empire, which had terrorized this region of space for 5 years, had ceased to exist as a military force. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the reports came in. The most aggressive empire in known space had been completely destroyed by forces that seemed to come from nowhere and return to nothing. Humanity's healers went back to their work of saving lives. But now everyone knew what protected them. The angels of death had descended, and they had shown the galaxy that mercy and strength were not opposites. They were two sides of the same coin, and humanity possessed both in equal measure. The Krath Empire's final response was exactly what Admiral Ryan Clark had expected. When desperate leaders faced complete defeat, they always made the same choice. They would attack the source of their problems directly, hoping to end the threat. With one massive strike, 300 Krath warships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. It was the largest fleet the galaxy had ever seen, comprising every remaining vessel in the Krath military. General Zektar had escaped from human custody during a prisoner transfer and had rallied what was left of his forces for one last desperate attack. The Krath fleet moved toward Earth with grim determination. Their sensors showed them a peaceful world with light defenses, a few orbital stations, some patrol ships, and the usual traffic of civilian vessels. It looked exactly like what they expected to find around a planet of healers and scientists. They were completely wrong, Commander. Beth Andrews sat in the cockpit of her fighter, callsign Reaper 1, as she waited for the order to engage. Her ship hung motionless in space, invisible to every sensor the Krath possessed. Around her, 99 other fighters waited in perfect silence. Beth's fighter did not appear in any official records. The technology that powered it had been developed in secret laboratories deep beneath the surface of Mars. The weapons it carried could punch through the armor of a battleship. The engines could accelerate it to near light speed without using conventional fuel. But the most impressive thing about Beth's fighter was not its weapons or its speed. It was the fact that it could exist in normal space and hyperspace at the same time. This allowed it to appear anywhere instantly without the usual delays of hyperspace travel. The Krath fleet had no idea what was waiting for them. Admiral Clark gave the order from his command center, buried 3 kilometers beneath the Swiss Alps. All units, you are cleared to engage. Show them what happens when someone threatens our healers. Beth smiled grimly as her fighter's systems came online. She had been training for this moment her entire career. The Krath had made the ultimate mistake. They had brought a war to Earth itself.
Reaper Squadron, this is Reaper 1, she broadcast to her pilots.
Target the command ships first. Make it quick and clean. We want survivors to tell the story. The battle began and ended in 11 minutes. The Krath had expected to fight Earth's patrol ships and orbital defenses. Instead, they found themselves facing fighters that appeared from nowhere, moved faster than physics should allow, and fired weapons that turned battleships into expanding clouds of superheated gas. Captain Tony Martinez piloted his fighter through the Krath formation. His weapons firing continuously. Each shot found its target with perfect accuracy. The enemy ships exploded around him like fireworks. their shields and armor offering no protection against human technology. Lieutenant Sarah Kim destroyed 6 Krath cruisers in 30 seconds. Her fighter moved through space like a deadly dancer, appearing behind enemy ships and vanishing before they could return fire. The Krath gunners tried desperately to target her, but their weapons were too slow and their sensors too primitive. Commander Jeff Wilson led the second wave of fighters against the Krath battleships. These were the largest vessels in the enemy fleet, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a small planet. Wilson's squadron eliminated all 12 of them in less than 4 minutes. The Krath fleet tried to retreat, but retreat was impossible. Human fighters surrounded them on all sides, appearing and disappearing at will. Every attempt to escape was blocked by weapons fire that tore through their ships like paper. General Zektar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his fleet die around him. His tactical officers shouted damage reports that made no sense. Ships were being destroyed by weapons that his scientists insisted were impossible. Fighters were moving at speeds that violated the known laws of physics. How many ships are attacking us? Zektar demanded. His sensor officer checked his readings 3 times before answering. 100 fighters, sir. Just 100. Zektar stared at the tactical display. Destroyed by 100 small fighters. It was impossible, but it was happening before his eyes. The flagship shuddered as human weapons found their target. Emergency lights bathed the bridge in red as systems failed throughout the ship. Zektar felt the deck tilting beneath his feet as the artificial gravity began to fluctuate. Beth Andrews brought her fighter alongside the Krath flagship. Her weapons were charged and ready, but her orders were specific. Some enemies needed to survive to tell the story of what they had witnessed. Krath flagship, this is Commander Andrews of the Terran Defense Force. She broadcast on an open channel. Outgunned. You are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to galactic law. Zektar looked at the small fighter hanging beside his massive battleship. The vessel was barely larger than a shuttle, but it had just helped destroy an entire fleet. The general felt something he had never experienced before in 30 years. Of warfare, he felt completely helpless. We surrender, he said quietly. The battle was over. Debris from 300 Krath warships formed a temporary ring around Earth's moon. Of the 50,000 Krath personnel who had participated in the attack, 47,000 were dead. The 3,000 survivors were pulled from escape pods and lifeboats by human rescue ships. Not a single human casualty was reported. President Victoria Hayes appeared before the Galactic Council 6 hours after the battle ended. The chamber was packed with representatives from every major civilization in known space. Everyone wanted to understand what they had just witnessed. The Krath Empire attacked our healers, Victoria said simply. They murdered doctors and nurses who were trying to help people. They declared war on the concept of mercy. This was our response. The Altarian ambassador raised his hand. President Hayes, where did these weapons come from? Our intelligence services had no knowledge of such capabilities. Victoria's expression remained calm. We have always possessed these capabilities. We simply chose not to use them. We preferred to heal rather than harm, to build rather than destroy. But when someone threatens our healers, they force us to reveal our other nature. The Centaurian representative stood up. How long have you been hiding these forces? We have not been hiding anything, Victoria replied. We have been focusing our efforts on medicine and science because that is what the galaxy needed. But we never forgot that sometimes force is necessary to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Ambassador Liu from the Vegan Coalition looked worried. What assurance do we have that Earth will not use these weapons against other species? Victoria smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The same assurance you have always had. As long as you do not threaten our healers, you have nothing to fear from us. But if you attack our doctors, if you murder our nurses, if you target our medical facilities, then you will face the same fate as the Krath. The chamber fell silent. Every representative understood the message. Humanity had revealed that their greatest strength was not their compassion. It was their ability to protect that compassion with overwhelming force. General Zektar, sat in his cell aboard a human prison ship, thinking about everything that had happened. In less than a week, his empire had gone from being the most feared military force in the galaxy to being completely destroyed by an enemy most people had considered peaceful. The human guards treated him well. They gave him food, medical care, and access to communication systems so he could contact what remained of his government. They were professional and courteous, just like the human doctors he had ordered killed. But Zektar could see the truth. In their eyes, these were not healers pretending to be soldiers. These were soldiers who had chosen to protect healers. There was a difference, and that difference had cost him everything. The galaxy would remember this lesson. Earth's children came in two forms, and both were equally dangerous to those who threatened what they protected. The healers would continue their work of saving lives. But now everyone knew what watched over them from the shadows. The angels of death had shown their faces, and the galaxy would never be the same. 3 months after the destruction of the Krath Empire, Dr. Maya Rodriguez opened her new clinic on the rebuilt medical station Epsilon. The station looked exactly like the old one, with the same white corridors and the same peaceful atmosphere. But something important had changed. Maya was not alone this time, A team of security specialists had been assigned to protect the medical facility. They called themselves medical security, but Maya knew what they really were. She had seen soldiers, like them before, during the rescue operations that had followed the Krath attacks. They moved with the same quiet confidence, the same watchful awareness of everything around them. The patients still came to the station, seeking treatment for injuries and illnesses from across the galaxy. They received the same compassionate care they had always received from human doctors. But now they whispered among themselves about the humans who watched from the shadows. Commander. Jake Sullivan stood in his new office at Proxima Station, looking out at the busy medical bay below. His staff was larger now, with more doctors and nurses than ever before. The galactic community had requested additional human medical support after seeing what happened to those who threatened Earth's healers. But Jake's medical personnel were different now. Every doctor had received advanced combat training. Every nurse carried concealed weapons. Every medical technician knew how to fight as well as heal. They were still healers first, but they were no longer defenseless. The new head of security for Proxima Station was Captain Lisa Chen. She had volunteered for the position after spending 5 years with the Special Operations Division. Her official job was to protect the medical facility from external threats. Her real job was to make sure that everyone in the galaxy understood that attacking human healers to bring swift and terrible consequences. Dr. Alan Foster had returned to work 6 weeks after his rescue from the Krath prison. He had been offered a safe position on Earth, but he had refused. The galaxy needed human doctors. Foster was not going to let fear keep him from doing his job. But Foster was not the same man who had been captured by the Krath. During his imprisonment, he had learned that mercy and strength were not opposites. He had seen human soldiers move through an impossible fortress to rescue him. He had watched them eliminate dozens of guards without killing a single one unnecessarily. Now Foster worked with a new understanding. His job was to heal, but healing. It was only possible when healers were protected. The galaxy had learned that lesson the hard way, and Foster made sure that every patient who came to his clinic understood it too. The former territories of the Krath Empire were divided among the species they had conquered. The Zephyrians reclaimed their homeworld, the Andromedans rebuilt their colonies, Centaurians established new trade routes through space that had been closed to them for years, but everyone understood that Earth's invisible guardians were watching. The Shadow Fleet still patrolled the empty spaces between stars. Special forces still waited in hidden bases for the next threat to emerge. The weapons that had destroyed the Krath still existed, ready to be used against anyone foolish enough. To follow their example, Admiral Ryan Clark had disbanded most of his special units after the Krath War ended. The soldiers had returned to their secret bases. The ships had faded back into the darkness between stars, and the weapons had been locked away in hidden vaults. But they had not been destroyed or forgotten. The galaxy now knew that humanity possessed forces beyond their understanding. More importantly, They knew that these forces would emerge whenever Earth's healers were threatened. It was a simple equation that even the most aggressive species could understand. President Victoria Hayes addressed the Galactic Council one final time before stepping down from office. Her presidency had been defined by the transition from peaceful diplomacy to protective strength. She had shown the galaxy both sides of humanity's nature. "We prefer to heal rather than harm," she told the assembled representatives. "We would rather build hospitals than weapons, rather train doctors than soldiers, but we will never allow our healers to be murdered for the crime of showing mercy." The applause that followed was different from the polite acknowledgement that usually greeted council speeches. There was respect in it, but also fear. Every representative understood that they were applauding both humanity's compassion and humanity's capacity for violence. Years passed, and the galaxy settled into a new peace. It was a deeper peace than had existed before the Krath War built, not just on treaties and agreements, but on a shared understanding of consequences. Species that had been planning aggressive expansion quietly abandoned their plans. Nations that had been considering attacks on their neighbors chose negotiation instead. The human medical stations became more than just hospitals. They became symbols of the new galactic order. To see a human doctor was to be reminded that healing and protection went hand in hand. To threaten a human healer was to invite destruction beyond imagination. Dr. Rodriguez often thought about the patients she treated now compared to the ones she had treated before the war. They were more respectful, more grateful, and more aware of the privilege they were receiving. They understood that human medical care was not just advanced technology and skilled practitioners. It was a gift protected by forces that could reshape. The galaxy knew medical students arrived at Earth's universities from dozens of worlds, hoping to learn from humanity's healers. They studied not just medicine, but also the philosophy behind it. They learned that true healing required both the compassion to help others and the strength to protect that compassion. The Krath. Survivors were eventually released from human custody and allowed to establish a small colony on a remote world. They were forbidden from developing military technology or establishing armed forces. Their children grew up learning about the war their parents had started and lost. General Zektar spent his final years writing memoirs that became required, reading at military academies throughout the galaxy. His book, titled The Price of Attacking Healers, became the most widely read military history in known space. In it, he described watching his empire die in 11 minutes and learning that mercy protected by strength was the most dangerous force in the universe. Commander Beth Andrews retired from active duty, but remained on call for special missions. Her fighter, Reaper 1, was placed in a museum on Earth with a simple plaque that read, "Flown in defense of those who heal." The galaxy learned to whisper a new truth among the stars. Earth's children came in two forms: those who healed with gentle hands and caring hearts, and those who dealt death with precision and terrible purpose. Both were equally devoted to their calling, and both were equally dangerous to those who threatened what they protected. The message echoed through space and time, carried by traders and diplomats to the farthest reaches of known civilization. Attack Earth's healers, and you will face the angels of death. There will be no negotiation, no mercy, no survivors. Humanity had shown the galaxy that the greatest strength was not the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to know when destruction was necessary to protect what was good and pure and worth. Saving the healers continued their work, and the angels watched over them, and the galaxy was at peace.